Welcome to the Inside Source Executive Interview Series. My name is Dawn Tiura, and I'm President and CEO of Sourcing Industry Group. And here with me today is David Natoff. And I've known David, he's from Google, but I've known him for a number of years, and he's a fabulous gentleman and a visionary. He splits his time between Mountain View, California, and Dublin, Ireland. So he is always on the road. He leads an international team of Googlers, and he runs their procure-to-pay process. And he also is the person responsible for the fabulous suppliers that Google has in their supply chain, as well as all the travel needs of all the Googlers. And as you know, they're all over the world. But you've done a really good job also marketing procurement to the rest of the company. You're a respected part of the organization, and they come to you. Can you give other people some hints on how did you do that, and how did you have that kind of success within Google itself?
I think fundamentally doing is kind of a key aspect of it. I think there are all sorts of tips and tricks and techniques and PR and marketing, and that's all great and phenomenal. But I think it's about looking at your stakeholder map, understanding where the spend is happening, understanding where the biggest impact can be, and really going out and trying to engage with stakeholders. And engage with stakeholders by demonstrating the value that you can add. And if you are successful, your greatest supporters will be the stakeholders that you've just successfully demonstrated value for. And it is incredible how they will jump up and down and shout at, wow, look at what we did. There are a whole bunch of things that we did in the early days, and it really was finding advocates within the organization that absolutely bought in to the value. One of my early advocates was a very senior individual in our Dublin site, and he was head of SMB sales, and he actually interviewed me when I came into Google, and at the end of the interview I remember saying to him, John, that was the most unsalesy interview I've ever had. I felt that I was being grilled by the CFO. Turns out, yes, he's a head of sales, but he's a former CFO. But we connected straight away, and he could see the value that we could add. And he opened the door and enabled us to go into the negotiating table with key stakeholders. But as an advocate, he was very critical as well. If we didn't do a good job, he was very blunt in terms of saying that wasn't good enough. And it's important that you have that you get both the good and the bad. But I do remember himself and our then head of human resources in EMEA arguing about projects that our strategic sourcing team had done for them. And the head of marketing was sitting in the middle of them, looking at these two guys arguing. And then she looked straight at me and said, why the hell have you been working with me? My budget dwarfs both these two jokers. Well, let me tell you what I can do for you. And,
So you're invited into marketing.
We were invited into marketing, and we've been doing some phenomenal things. What was really interesting in marketing was we were able to move the needle much further in regions outside of the United States. Just because in the regions the organization was a little bit more centralized. So some of the biggest wins that we did and still are in markets like Japan, which Japan culturally is much more centralized. There's one person that owns the whole budget. It's much easier to work with one person and take huge waves of spend out. In the United States, it's a very, very fractured market for good reasons. We have lots and lots of products. So, it's harder to engage. You have to engage with lots of stakeholders. And the key piece is it's great to get the top-down buy-in, but you also have to work bottom up. You have to do too. And if you think, well, if only I can get the CIO or the CMO or whoever, to buy in, it does not stop.
Right.
Just because they're bought in doesn't mean that
you still have to sell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Add value. Let's not say sell. Right?
Or demonstrate value.
Yeah, demonstrate value.
Yes.
I think, as I say, demonstrating value that's a far better sales technique than going and saying, hey, I can do this, that, and
Right.
everything else. I mean, I think you can, there are lots of marketing things that you can do. We celebrated our 100th e-auction again back in the day. I think this was one of Dr. Bernd Huber's strategy. And Bernd came up with this wonderful idea of saying, let's ensure that our 100th e-auction is for hardware. And let's invite the CIO and the CFO into the auction so that they can actually see the auction. And by the way, every time anyone bids, we'll have a little pinging noise. So ping, ping, ping.
Get the excitement.
And you know, we had multiple vendors bidding, and we're in this room, and there's a whole bunch of people. And yeah, the excitement was phenomenal. As we knew, because we hadn't bidded this hardware before in some time, we saw phenomenal cost reductions, mostly down to Moore's law. Just the fact that, you know, so all it meant was we now have market price. And the reality is almost all of the providers had converged in terms of pricing. And so let's now focus on what the best product is. The pricing is irrelevant. They're all the same, 2 or 3 points between them.
Oh, that's awesome.
What does it matter? But just the energy that we saw within the CFO and the CIO was phenomenal. And they went off and marketed our services for us. It's far better to get other people to do that work.
Oh, it sure is. It sure is.
But I do believe, you know, demonstrating that value is the key, and then you can build a portfolio of the successful projects that you've done, and it's that portfolio that helps you actually get other business. And then the other piece is, you know, I work in a very, very large company now, and the reality is there are multiple business units, multiple organizations actually doing very, very similar things. And we now have the opportunity to connect these organizations together, and sometimes they don't even know it.
Right.
They're sometimes talking to the same partners.
Exactly.
And the partners themselves are enormous, and often don't even know that another salesperson within their own organization
Is within Google. Right. Right.
It's crazy. But I think, you know, we've been very successful in bringing some of that together, which again has added you know, huge value.
That's why I think our visibility within procurement is so phenomenal, because we do see across the entire organization, and we can impact play as it's happening in the field versus waiting to see it on a financial statement later.
Procurement has been, you know, very kind to me. It's where I started my career, you know, way back straight out of school. My first job was a buyer for Tower Records, would you believe?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's where my love of music comes from. You know, much to my wife's dismay, with all of the CDs in my office, you can't, it's floor to ceiling. But it's been a phenomenal profession, and you know, while today I consider myself more of a general manager, you know, I haven't actually touched, you know, procurement directly for some while. Yes, it ultimately reports into me, but so there's a bunch of other stuff. But I think it's a phenomenal profession, and we've actually touched upon some of this these last few days. You know, where we're talking about you know, a procurement professional having the ability to touch multiple parts of the business within the organization, the visibility that you get. And so for me, it's fantastic when I see procurement professionals perhaps move out of procurement and move in and support some of the businesses that they've been working with. That's great.
Yeah.
That's even better when that actually happens the other way around.
Yes.
And we've actually started to see that within our organization, where we've had you know, both people leave our strategic sourcing team and maybe move into more operation types roles, but people from completely outside of procure to pay, but in ops, moving into sourcing. Really, really smart guys, huge, you know, kind of EQs, but absolutely zero experience in procurement. But it's amazing how quickly you know, these guys ramp up. So from my point of view, I just want to instill some passion into a profession that has given me an awful lot over the last 20 years, and the more I can do, the better I feel, and the more that we can position procurement, I think it is the better for the companies that choose to have procurement organizations.
Well, I hope you stay in procurement, because I want to keep you within SIG. Unless you go to GBS or something like that, I want you to stay and keep being someone.
I think I'm always going to dabble.
Okay. Well, David, we are out of time right now, but I want to thank you. And once again, I know you've been a huge SIG advocate, but we're a huge David advocate.
Thank
so
you.
Anything we can ever do for you as well. But with that, we're out of time. And I just want to thank you for joining me today for the Inside Sourcing Executive Video Series.